Again, good morning. Welcome to our second theological hour. As we start, we call on Brother Seng Ongwe SJ for our opening prayer. And it will be followed by the national anthem, so please remain standing. Please stand.
So, dear friends, let's pause for a while. In the name of the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. Direct, O Lord, we beseech you, all our actions by your holy inspiration, and carry them on by your gracious assistance, that every work of ours may begin always from you, and by you be a fruitful end. Through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son.
Please be seated. So for today, we'll have conversations on Asian theologies and cultures with Father Nguyen Tin, and we will be talking about formulas, stories, and similes in Catechesis, Maiorica's Catechism and its initiatives in Inculturation. But for us to know more about our speaker, we welcome Father Eric, our president.
So welcome to everyone. We'd like to welcome our speaker, Father Nguyen Tin. Of course, you have seen our poster. No, if you will allow me to read the background of Father Tin. Father Tin was born of course, in Vietnam on the 2nd of May, 1972. He entered the Society of Jesus in 1995 and was ordained to the priesthood in 2007. He obtained his doctorate in sacred theology from the Pontifical Gregorian University in 2009. We were together with Father Rohel and Father Tin in our community at the Colegio San Roberto, Bellarmino in Rome. He has been teaching dogmatic theology courses at the Jesuit Theologate in Saigon, St. Joseph Jesuit Scholasticate, but also in the Catholic Institute of Vietnam in the same city in Saigon, as well as in other major seminaries and institutes in Vietnam. He has been a member of the Committee on Doctrine and Faith of the Conference of Bishops of Vietnam since 2010. He was is consultor of the Jesuit Vietnamese province since 2010. He is formation delegate since 2016. And just recently, we all know that the Federation of Asian Bishops Conferences held its conference in Bangkok, in Thailand. And Father Tinh was a member of that conference. He is a member of the Office of Theological Concerns of the FABC since 2020. So, brothers and sisters, let us welcome our speaker, Father Nguyen Tin.
Thank you very much, Father Eric Eusebio. First of all, I would like to thank the LST community, especially through the leadership of Father Eric and Father Rochelle, have invited me to be here with you. At the beginning, before this, Father Eric asked me when was the last time you were here. It was actually during the GC 6 years ago. But I said I would say that I graduated from the LST 20 years ago. That would be more dramatic. So it's very good to be back here, actually, to the LST community after 20 years and to see all of you today. That's my first thing to say. In the introduction, you did know that I was a former student of LST. My topic today is derived from a paper that I wrote maybe 7 years ago, 8 years ago, in 2014, when we celebrated our Jubilee year, celebrating the 400th anniversary of the Jesuit presence and evangelization in Vietnam. As you know, the history of the Catholic in Vietnam started with the Jesuits who arrived in 1615. So it's 400 years ago. So I wrote this paper, and today I'm happy to tell you about what I wrote. The topic would be the three methods or the three instruments that Father Majorika have used in his catechism: formula, stories, and similes. I will talk about that. Anybody here has heard of the name Majorika? No. It is very interesting that when I sent an email to Father Eric telling him that I would speak about the first catechism in Vietnam, and immediately he thought of Father Alexander the Road. Anybody here know Alexander the Road? Yeah, a lot of you, yeah. He's famous. When we speak about Vietnam, especially Vietnam language, then they will mention Alexander the Road. And you know that his catechism is very famous because it got published in Rome. And most of the academic work are in Europe. So Alexander the Road was known among the Europeans and known among the scholars. But this name, Majorika, is hardly known. So it's very interesting for me today to present to you this figure. Now, begin we start, let me just ask you another favor. There's a lot of seats up here. Could you please come up and fill, especially Vietnamese, if you allow me, please come up here. Yeah, please come. You could get a better view of the content because it's very interesting. Yeah, so the screen is here, and it would be nice if you come up here. And I look better also if you get closer here. Thank you. My content would be in 4 parts. First of all, the figure. Who is Girolamo Maiorica? Yeah, just feel free to come anytime. Don't need my urge. The figure. And then the work itself, the catechism. And then the second, third part, and fourth part in my own analysis and reflection. on the work. So this is the content of my presentation today. First, the author. His name is Girolamo Maiorica. He's from Italy. He's contemporary with Alexander the Great. They arrived in Vietnam at the same boat, on the same boat. But nobody knows that, because they thought that Alexander the Great came to Vietnam alone. They know only Alexander the Great. But on the same boat, there's another figure who is very famous, not famous, but very influential to Vietnamese Catholic Church. That is Girolamo Majorika. And I think also the Vietnamese here, nobody knows about him, even the Jesuits. Those who listened to my speak 7 years ago also does not know who is Girolamo Majorika. So that's why I am very excited to share with you today. And another point is he died in Vietnam. He died in Tonkin. Tonkin is in the north, Hanoi now. Cochinchina is in the south, Ho Chi Minh City. Yeah? But Tonkin is in the north, in Hanoi. And he lived there and died there. While Alexander the Great died in Iran. He left Vietnam. He came to Vietnam several times, 4 times. But he came and left. Majorika stayed. And he died there. His works, the more interesting is he wrote a lot of work in Vietnamese, in our language. They said that he wrote around 48 books, almost 50, but now remain only 16, and they are all in the National Library of France in Paris. Not in Vietnam. Vietnam do not have his books. But now the scholars in the University of Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, they know about him because his work is very precious and very unique in terms of Nôm language. Because he wrote his book in Nôm language. Any Vietnamese here know about Nôm language? What is Nôm language? Yeah, it's our language. When we speak Vietnamese, it's our language, but it's written in Han character, in Chinese character. It looks Chinese, but it's not Chinese. Yeah, let me show you. Yeah. Our brothers and sisters from China, can you read this? Can you understand this? No, except the title. Can you read those? This you understand now, but this I am sure you do not understand. Yeah. It looks Chinese, but it's not Chinese. It's like Bahasa and Tagalog, they are all written in ABC. If people don't know what ABC is, they thought Tagalog and Bahasa are the same language. But no, they are different language. They're written in the same character, but they are different language. So this is applied to Chinese and Nôm. Chinese, they are written in Han character. Nôm also is written in Han character, but they are different language. They are our language, not Han language. So that's what his book is about. And nowadays we transliterate that into alphabet, Latin alphabet. This is the nowadays written Vietnamese language. But before, 400 years ago, it would be written in Han character. So that is Nôm. And it's very precious because it's the only work remain from the 17th century, which were written in Nôm. The earliest Nôm text, Vietnamese, do you understand that? Earliest Nôm text existent today. That's why it is very famous among the scholars, but not among Catholics. So that's his importance. The road is missionary for the literati, for the Nho, thầy Nho. But Majorika is for common people. He talked to common people. He wrote for common people, not for the literati. He wrote a lot about the story of Jesus, about the story of the saints, and he helped people to pray during Mass and during the liturgical season. Because during that time, the priest would say Mass in Latin and turn his back to the people. And the people sometimes didn't know what the priests are doing. So Majorika has to, when the priest elevate the bread, what good the people pray inside their heart and their mind. So they follow the Mass. Majorika help the people to follow the Mass with their prayer. That's what they wrote about. That's the content of his writing. Now, the first catechism, this is our translation. So, and this is the first page of the book, written in Nome and written in Latin alphabet. So this is the face of the catechism. The first catechism, it was written before 1634. So maybe 12 years earlier than Alexander wrote Catechism. You know what is the title of the Alexander wrote Catechism? The preaching of the 8 days, or 8 days preaching. That's the literal translation. It was written most early would be in 1645. And it was published in 1651 in Rome. But this work, this Catechism of Maiorica was written before 1634. And it was his first work, first of the 50 works. The title is Introduction to the Sacred Religion of God. In Chinese, you could understand this. Thiên Chúa Thánh Giáo Khải Mông. Thiên Chúa Thánh Giáo Khải Mông, something like that. Yeah. And it is based on Bellarmine's short catechism. You know that Saint Bellarmine, no? He wrote long catechism, middle catechism, and short catechism for different people. And so Majorica's catechism is based on Bellarmine's short catechism for common people, not for the literati. The form of this catechism is very simple, question and answer, very basic. While Alexander the Roth's catechism would be in prose, this is discursive, logical reasoning and so on, for high-class people. Here, just for common people, question, answer, question, answer. The structure of the catechism is organized in 4 parts: belief, prayer, commandments, and sacraments. But the part of sacrament is lost. We could not find it. It is mentioned in the beginning that this could consist of 4 parts, but finally we found only 3 parts in the content of the book. So it talks only about the belief, is the credo, the creed. He analyzed the creed. Prayer, he analyzed the Our Father and Ave Maria. The commandment, he will teach about the 10 commandments to the people. So the structure is, in Vietnamese, would be tin, xin, giữ, chịu. That's 4 parts of the catechism until today. If you open the catechism today, you will see 4 parts. Tin, chịu, giữ, xin. The belief, the sacrament, the creed, and then the sacrament, and then the commandment, and then prayer. That's 4 parts. But in Majorika, following the structure of Bellarmine's catechism, creed, prayer, commandment, and sacrament. Now, this work has a long-lasting influence on the Catholic people in Vietnam. I just will show you some of the illustration, at least in 3 areas. In practice, in the faith formula, the formula that expressed faith, and in the word, Catholic idiom that we use. that we found already in the Catechism in 1634. Practice, this is common practice among the Europeans during that time, but it was taught in the Catechism and it is still, they are still kept today. For example, being Catholic means you know how to recite by heart this prayer, Our Father, Ave Maria. And until maybe some decades ago, when you join Catholic Church, you had to learn by heart those prayers. The catechism in our church, very simple. They teach the new converts the prayer, and that's it. So this habit, this practice already existed 400 years ago. Making the sign of the cross everywhere you go, every time you depart, every time you go home before meal, and every time you want to say some prayer. This is also a habit that common Vietnamese Catholic Church still practicing today. And it's already taught in the Catechism 400 years ago. The second illustration, there are many formulas that are still in use today. If you know Vietnamese, that you find those formulas are very familiar. The meaning is basic, Trinity, but the Vietnamese formulation, the formulation in Vietnamese language is long-lasting. Ba ngôi một Chúa ba ngôi. Already taught by Majorika 400 years ago, and nowadays it is still common. This formula also, ba ngôi một tính, một ý, một phép. One nature, one will, one power. Một tính, một ý, một phép. That's very familiar to Vietnamese Catholic. Ba ngôi có hai tính. Yeah, sometimes we correct it, hai bản tính. Yeah. But that's also familiar. The wording, and just note that these words are used exclusively among Catholics. The non-Catholics do not use these words. They don't know these words. Thương khó, sự thương khó. Nobody knows what is thương khó. Only Catholic Vietnamese know. So this is the heritage from 400 years ago, from Majorika. He translated it into thương khó. Tin kính. The creed we translated into kinh tin kính. Sinh thì, dying is sinh thì. Vietnamese do not know sinh thì. Only Catholic know. Hằng sống also. Cả sáng. Trị đến, dùng đủ. A few decades ago we still use dùng đủ. Cho chúng con hôm nay lương thực dùng đủ. Cho chúng con dùng đủ hàng ngày. Only recently we translated it to cho chúng con lương thực hàng ngày. So we lost the heritage of 400 years ago. Cho chúng con dùng đủ hàng ngày dùng đủ. So those are the influence. So if the Vietnamese Catholic are convinced, then do you think that these words are still in use today? Are you familiar with it, with them? Yeah. And so they are taught by Majorika. It is written, they are written in the Catechism. So I would like to mention those why this book is very interesting for Inculturation. First, because Majorika has made great choices in favor of Inculturation. First, he used short catechism. He didn't use long catechism that people would not follow, would not be able to follow, to read and to understand. He used a lot of adjustment to the mentality, to the psyche of the An Nam people. They call Vietnamese people An Nam people, to the local people. And he used the popular language. So this is the text. But you could say that not everybody could read this text in Nom, in hand character. That's true. Not everybody, common people cannot read this because A lot of people are non-literate. And even today, some people are non-literate, so they cannot read even this. So common people cannot read. So reading is not a problem. It's not a challenge for Majorika. So he wrote this for the preacher, the lay preacher. Yeah, he organized lay people, those who can read, and he gave them the books. And when they went to the villages, they brought with them the books, and they read the book to the people to listen, to hear. That's why it's short catechism and in popular language, even though people cannot read, but they could listen and understand the content of the book. And the content is very popular, very common. So that's the purpose of this catechism. And so what I would like to mention here is he made a good choice. He was not concerned about the people, how people can read his book, but he's concerned about how the people could understand his book. What language would he use? If we compare to the road, we would see more this significance of his choice. The road's preachings of the 8 days is written in Latin alphabet. That means it looks like foreign language, Latin alphabet, unfamiliar to local people. But Majorika Catechism is named Introduction. It was written in Nome, readable by the literati and understandable by common people. Alexander Rose's catechism is long and prose, stylistic, philosophical, logical, and so on. And it is famous among the scholars. Majorika introduction is short, simple for ordinary people, and his wording, his idea, his images, and his influence among the common people. For the road, it is printed and published in Europe. For Majorika, his books were disseminated in Vietnam. That's why not so many scholars know about this. That's why you heard always about the road and not about Majorika. So starting from today, I hope that we will hear more about Majorika among the scholars of the LST. And I will mention earlier in the fourth part, what is the purpose of enculturation? What is the nature of enculturation? It should be from the grassroots. I will not reject the idea that we make the enculturation from upside down, from up down. But we could also do it from down up. And that's what Majorika was doing. And we can learn a lot about this from him. Now, my own analysis of the catechism. I just would like to mention 3 features that could be highlighted. He used formula, which I call formula. He didn't call that this is the formula. But I would like to call those methods that he used as formula. We can use another term, I don't know, but for temporary use, I use the word formula. Second, he used a lot of stories. And third, he used a lot of similes. Example, illustration from the local context. First, formula, why he used formula? I think that his concern is to crystallize the doctrine so that people can easily memorize and know the truth of faith. So I think his concern is very orthodox, no? He needs people to know, to memorize the truth of faith. Before we can make any explanation or illustration or connection to the local context, we need people to understand, to know and to understand the truth of faith. So that's what is his concern. I can say that he used 3 types of formula. First, a summary. Second, some kind of rhyming. I don't know how to use it in English, but I hope you understand. Rhyming aphorism. That's very popular in Vietnam. We say words that is rhyming one to one another. Creative answers also is kind of formulation. First, summary formula. This, I just give you one example. This is very common, but it's a good formulation of the creed, that he divided the creed into 2 parts. One part is about God, and one part is about the church. 2 parts. So you remember the creed, that 2 parts, one part about God, one part of the church. About God, you mentioned three persons, Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. For the church, in the creed also we mentioned 3, he called 3 graces: the baptism, the resurrection, and the everlasting life. So that's common people good know the structure of, and the content of the creed very quickly. Have you ever thought of the creed in that way? No? So this is good for comprehensive exam. If the professor asks, you tell me the content or the structure of the creed consists of 2 parts, God and the church. God, 3 persons. For the church, we have 3 graces. This is very, very, very creative, no? Very brilliant for Majorika. And common people 400 years ago, they know about it. They knew about it. Some example of rhyming formula or aphorism. I think it suits very well with Vietnamese oral tradition because they could not read, so they would try to memorize. And the best way to memorize is rhyming. And some formula are still in use today. Just to say that it's very deeply rooted already in the psyche of the Vietnamese people. For example, Đức Kitô là thầy cả trên hết các thầy. This is very common, thầy cả trên hết các thầy. When he explained about Messiah, what does it mean Messiah? He said that he is the teacher of teachers. But in Vietnamese it sounds very nice, thầy cả trên hết các thầy. Vua trên hết các vua. King of kings. And this also incorporated, this formula was incorporated into the prayer, common prayer of Vietnamese people. Another formula is very popular today is lòng lo miệng nói mình làm. Still familiar? Lòng lo miệng nói mình làm. Just some years ago when we say kính cáo mình, mea culpa, we use this formula. But nowadays we use another prayer. So that's why I was not so keen on changing prayer. When we change prayer, we lose the heritage of 400 years ago. Lòng lo miệng nói mình làm. Nowadays we say that phạm tội nhiều trong tư tưởng in mind, trong tư tưởng lời nói và việc làm. In mind, in wording and in action. Creative answer. Now, before you sleep, I would like to give you a quiz. This is very interesting. When reason, how old are we? You are doing STL, no? Can you answer this question? It's not easy, no? I think this question is raised by the people themselves. So Majorika, when we went with the people ask questions like this. How could you answer? You don't say that, no, that's an illegal question. That's not a good question. When reason, how old are you? At which age? Anybody can answer that? If you try to answer that, you are doing inculturation. If you say that, oh, this in theology they don't teach that. And you say that, in the everlasting life, we don't have age. And the people said, why you don't have faith? Why? What kind of theology you are studying? Then you just dismiss the question. Yeah, dismissing the question sometimes is a good method. But people would like an answer. How could we do it? Now try. That's enculturation. Why Jesus had to wait for the third day to rise up and not earlier? Now if you try to find answer for this, then you will see the brilliance of Majorika. It's very brilliant. I will show you the answer now. But just 2 more seconds to think. Have you ever circled with these questions? Yeah. We study here in LSD, never we ask this question. But if you teach catechism to the common people, you have to struggle with these questions. And that's enculturation. Now let's see Majorika's answer. When we arise in the last day, we will be 33 years old, the same as the risen Jesus. Very clear, very simple. Don't say that the everlasting life is another transcendent fear and it's no time, no space. People don't understand. Why no time, no space? So the answer is clear-cut, 30 years old. It sounds like in the introduction I said, it sounds like not so good, no? Not so good theology. Yeah? But in my analysis, it's a good theology. 30 years old, the important phrase is the same as the risen Jesus. Why? Because like St. Paul said, when we are risen, we become like Christ. That is theologically correct. The 33 years old may be not correct, but it could be understood symbolically. And when it understood symbolically, it is theologically correct. So this is the brilliance of Majorika to common people. A second question, why didn't Jesus arise earlier? Now, his answer is that, like Jesus lived 33 years, so he need to stay with the dead for 33 hours. But Jewish hour, yeah? Not Annam hour, not Vietnamese hour, Jewish hour. So we don't know what Jewish hour, but they got convinced. I thought so. 33 years and 33 hours. So I call this kind of formulation. And formulation is a method to preach to the common people who would not understand philosophical arguments or reasoning, who would not accept that, who would just expect clear-cut image, number, and idea. But how to convey to them the idea and image symbolically? That's the point. So the answer sounds funny, but it's theologically correct. Okay, so maybe I should skip some of the illustration because we don't have time. I intended to speak in 1 hour only, and we leave half an hour for your answers. Yeah. So story is the same. He tells a lot of story. But please pay attention. Why formula, stories, and simile? Formulas are meant to capture the attention and the memory of the people. Stories try to capture their heart. So Majorika didn't mean to teach only the truth, but to inspire. That's why he used story. After teaching the truth, he put the question, how could you explain to me that I believe more? That's the question from the people. So he told a story. The story is to inspire people, not only to teach them in the mind, but to reach them in the heart. Why similes? Similes because he tried to explain the mysteries of faith or the philosophical concepts of dogma in images that are familiar to the local people. So just to notice that. That's enculturation. So I skip the story and similes. Now, another quiz. This is interesting to wake you up. This is the question raised by the people and recorded in the Catechism. Why is the Holy Spirit not called the Father of Jesus? Because the Holy Spirit make the Virgin Mary concept Jesus. No? Conceive. Make the Saint Mary to conceive Jesus in her womb. Why the Holy Spirit was not called the Father? Why? Any student? It's not easy. Yeah? It sounds funny, but people make questions like that. People put questions like that. How could we answer? And the second question also very interesting. How does the Father generate the Son? Because you said that the Father generates the Son, but how does it generate so that they can appear at the same time? It's not that the Father exists first and that the Son exists later. How could that happen? So this is very, very difficult, challenging questions. Majorika answers like this. Like the carpenter who makes the house is not called the father of the house. So the Holy Spirit make the conception of Jesus from the womb of the Virgin Mary. So he's like a carpenter, but he's not a father. He does not give Jesus his nature. Only the Father gives Jesus his nature. And to explain how the Father generates the Son, instead of using the scholastic concept of the mind generate itself, or the idea of generate itself, very abstract. Majorika used the image of the mirror. The mirror. When we look at ourselves at the mirror, that image appears at the same time we appear before the mirror. The image and you understand that? Yeah. So he explained, because the common people would struggle with the idea that the Father and the Son existed at the same time, and is like one another, one nature, one power, and so on. So Majorika used the image of the mirror that explain why the image and the reality appear at the same time and exactly as one another. Now, the fourth part, my reflection. So I would like to share with you that enculturation begins at the grassroots level to common people. And culture is life. Culture begins with life, not with concept of culture. And so enculturation begins with life, not with concept. We use concept, and it's necessary to use concept, but starting with life. And catechism is the first step for theological enculturation. That's why I think St. Ignatius always urged Jesuits to teach catechism to children. Because when you teach catechism to children, you got a lot of ideas for enculturation. Catechism is important. And theology is starting from there. And theological enculturation also can start from there. That's what I would like to offer today. Enculturation is not an end in itself. It's not because we need to enculturate and not know why. Why we have to do a Filipino theology? Why we need to do a Vietnamese theology? Because we need publication? That's not the end. But sometimes it's like the motto now. If you want to publish something in the US, we need to talk about Vietnamese. Otherwise, you cannot get published. But publication is not the end of enculturation. It could remain in books and in library. The end of enculturation is evangelization, to make the gospel take root in the mind and the heart of the people. And Majorika has done that brilliantly in his very simple and short catechism. And it got ignored, it got forgotten. And we could learn a lot of lessons from it today. So, 3 goals of Majorika I just mentioned already: help people to know, to understand, and to live the truths of faith. The mind, the heart, and the hands and the legs of the people get involved into evangelization. First, I would like to offer some reflection on formula. Formula does not, for me, is not an archaic instrument. And I think in LST we are doing good, we are doing well when we do comprehensive exam. And in comprehensive exam, we need to have reflection on the subjects that we have learned. But we need also memorize what we learn. And this is important. We need formula. And I think it is still very in fashion today. Just think of TikTok. You know TikTok? Yeah, I like TikTok. And sometimes I find that on TikTok, the trends, the new trends, that's the formulation of expressions of life. And the young people need that. And young people find that that's important. So they express themselves in trends. That is in formulation, in formula. Sometimes the formula is an action, it's a dance or something. But sometimes the formula is by words. Now, in Vietnamese, we have saying like this, very popular among the teenagers. Buồn như con chuồn chuồn, chán như con gián. Rhyming, yeah? Rhyming aphorism. I guess that you would have similar saying like that in Tagalog or in English. If you say that I am sad, I am very sad, it's not so strong, not so strong an expression. But buồn như con chuồn chuồn, I am sad like how do you say chuồn chuồn? Butterfly or something? Yeah. So that's formulas are still in need today among the young people, and they need that. They need the common expression of life. And theology can also talk with people in that way. We need to talk in formula. There's a negative side of that. Yeah, many people could complain that reality is rich. How could you force reality into a box, which is a formula? But in reality, people need that. People know that reality is richer than formula, but they still use formula. So I think that's my reflection. Formulas are needed only for communication, but only for life, but also for life, for reality. We talk about relativism, no? Relativism is no formula for life, for reality. Reality is fluid. But even when reality is fluid, it is already a formula. When you say that reality is fluid, it's already a formula. So there's really a tension between the clarity and fluidity of reality. But formulas are necessary. And I think formulas are like steps on the ladder. We need them to go beyond that. We need to go beyond formula to express reality more authentically, but we need formula. We cannot describe formula right away. We need the step to go beyond the step. And Majorika has used it. And he has proved his success because of the popular of his teaching among the Vietnamese Catholic today. It has been proved historically. Not many Vietnamese people have read Alexander Rhodes' Catechism. It is read among the literati and the scholars, European scholars. But Vietnamese people don't know what Rhodes is talking about. Vietnamese people may not know about this catechism, but the ideas, the image, the formula in the catechism are deeply rooted in their life now. So that's the success of this catechism. This is the success of this method of enculturation, of this channel of enculturation. Even science tries to formulate reality and so on. Yeah. So we talk about dogma and here. So I want to keep that. Now, just some reflection, more practical. If we say that formula are necessary for life, for theology, how could we create formula today? I don't know. I don't have the answer. But I should give some hints. I think of some hints. We use both traditional formula, dogma, doctrines, and also formula in our cultures and language, popular beliefs, and so on. Not in the way that one kind of formula would replace the traditional formula, but how to make them compatible, how to make them help one another, illustrate one another. And so we need learn the dogma and the doctrines, but we also get acquainted, get used, get familiar with the formulas of life of the people nowadays. That's why apostolate immersion is important. We know how they speak. We know what kind of formula are mostly used among them. That is important. Similes. If formula help people to catch the content of faith, similes help people to understand their meaning, understand the truth of faith. This is the method of correlation that you heard very much in theology. Correlation between life and faith. It gives insight, intuition into the mystery. It has analogical, dynamic, and not literal. Yeah. So sometimes if you say that 33 years old, if you understand it literally, it could be not correct. But if you understand it analogically or symbolically, it is theologically correct. The whole theology is a simile. How to find similes? Yeah. Similes is not replaced by concept. We need concept, and in theology we use a lot of concept. But concepts are developed from the similes and based on the similes. Concepts are sometimes distant from the reality that we want to express. Similes are more intuitive. But how to know similes? We need to know people's life and their experience. Majorika talk about, use a lot of image in agriculture, in carpenter's image also, because those are the professions of the people of Vietnam during that time. Today, we also could think about digital culture. Digital culture is another profession that can provide a lot of image that can enter the people's mind and heart. And so that's just some suggestion. Stories. We know that stories are important because the Gospels themselves offer stories, tell stories. And theology is also comprise a lot of narrative. They call meta-narrative. Yeah? Incarnation, resurrection, they are all meta-narrative. So, and you heard some priests in the homily tell a lot of stories. And maybe some people would protest. The gospel themselves are telling a story already. Why should we tell another story? That's a real question, no? Yeah. For example, the gospel is about a parable. But to explain the parable, you would tell another story. So the question is, why we need more story? Yeah, we need another story not to replace the gospel story, but to inspire and to invoke what the parable of the gospel are doing. So we can use story, and we also should use story in compatibility with the narrative of the gospel. There's a danger, yeah? There's a latent danger in that, because sometimes we tell a complete different story. Then that would not invoke the gospel story. But if in case it invokes the gospel story, then this is theologically correct. Which story? So I thought of many stories nowadays, ideological stories like the East and the West, nationalism, ethnicism, and so on. Globalization stories like human rights, individual freedom, etc. Consumerism stories like goods, labels, trademarks. So those are stories that people are telling in outside society. They could also be used in theology. We can make reference to novel, movies, TV shows, newspaper, digital and social network, etc. Conclusion. Catechism is important for enculturation. It's not a lower method, it's a low medium, and we should not care about it because we are doing theology. No, catechism is very important for theology. Immersion in people's life are obligatory and necessary. And another point is when we create new methods, new forms to preach the gospel, it should be compatible with the gospel. I think that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father Tin, for that very deep explanation and reflection of Maiorica's simple but powerful style of enculturation. I will never forget that catechism means not only to teach in the level of the mind, but to also teach in the level of the heart. And this can be done through formulas, similes, and stories. And I hope our brothers and sisters here have also felt the same and inspired to know more and learn more about Maiorica's style of enculturation. So just for now, just like the form of Maiorica's catechism, which if we listen is about questions and answers, we now enter also into the question and answer portion of today's program. So for those who have questions, queries, and things that you want to ask or say to Father Tin, You may go at the center aisle, and you can just line up if there are many questions. We can begin now for about 30 minutes. Things that you want to clarify, or you find something inspiring for you. How about from our oblate brothers? Anyone? Yes, yes, brother.
Thank you, Father Tim, for this presentation. I am Isidore Kawaya, Saverian missionary. I have maybe a twofold question. The end of enculturation is evangelization, and this was for me a takeaway. But I would like to ask, since evangelio means something new that is being announced to people, are there any elements new that were questioned by Girolamo in Vietnam? So that he questioned and he wanted them to change because the Evangelio is new. So what are these new things that he wanted to change somehow to the people to whom he was sent? Second point of this question is about something new he might have learned from the culture of Vietnamese. And this can be also helpful for us today in our mission. Thank you.
Well, yes, thank you for the question. The first part, what is the newness about even about the gospel that Majorika tell to the people that people should know the gospel? Like Alexander the Road, he mentioned about the everlasting life. He told people that if you know the gospel, you would have everlasting life. And also the Road used the first preaching, the first day of preaching to convince the people of that. Majorika didn't convince the people with the whole long page of explanation that you could not find happiness in this day and so on. And the longest life, because Asian people, Vietnamese people like their life to be long. Yeah? Longevity is a value in the Vietnamese culture. So he said that no life is long unless it is everlasting. The afterlife. So that's the newness that the gospel bring about, that Majorika would the people know about, would like the people to know. But he didn't explain it very long. He told a story. And he told several stories. Some stories are threatening. He told a story of the lady in Manila. So that's why it is very interesting, because it may be a story that was spread around among the missionaries, Dominicans and Jesuits. So a lady in Manila who died before knowing of God and the sacred religion, but after a few days she wake up and suddenly she knows to recite Our Father and Ave Maria. So the people asked them, where did you learn this from? She said, I learned it during my death time, my dying time. An angel of the Lord appeared to me and taught me those prayers. So that's the kind of stories. To convince people that the gospel is worth learning. You should learn about this sacred religion. That's what he do. And the second part of the question, if I understand it correctly, what is the newness that Majorika brought to Vietnamese people? I compare this catechism with the short catechism of Bellarmine and the catechism of the Trent Council. I find it is very contextual. Those three that I mentioned are very contextual: formula, stories, and similes. They are not mentioned in the Bellarmine short catechism or in the Trent catechism. And I think that Majorika used those because he has been familiar with the people in Vietnam. And that is the newness of this catechism compared to other catechisms that were popular during that day, that time. So if I understand the question correctly, that would be the answers. Yeah.
Father Tin, thank you very much for this very enlightening presentation about Maiorica's catechism. One of the points that you mentioned at the beginning of your talk was the creative use of the Nom language in introducing the catechism to the ordinary people. And what Maiorica did was to coin new meanings for certain words which are not normally understood or utilized in secular language. In many respects, you said that the catechism has become deeply ingrained in the memory, in the culture of the Catholic Vietnamese. But I wonder how this has affected the larger Vietnamese population. Like in the Philippines, the missionaries also kind of did a lot of enculturation, and we also experience a lot of this in our language. No? There are expressions which even non-religious people would be able to express for something which is not really religious, like when people, older people would say, "Kaawaan ka ng Diyos." It has become a common expression in Filipino, no? God will be merciful to you, but it has become a more common expression that may not have religious connotation in it, but simply that you are blessed. Yeah.
Thank you, Father Rohel. Yeah, it's an interesting question for us to ponder, Vietnamese, to ponder about. But I think, yeah, we don't have that. We don't have that influence to the larger society. What I just mentioned this morning is influence among the Catholics. If the Vietnamese Catholics don't know the ngắm đứng, the content of the ngắm đứng is very much from Majorika in his book on the Jesus Christ. Ngắm đứng is, the last time we have the standing meditation, yeah, the content of that meditation, which lasted for centuries, especially in the north of Vietnam, the content of which, much of which come from Majorika books, yeah. So that's why Majorika is very influential to the Vietnamese, Catholic Vietnamese. But to influence outside the Catholic circle, I don't think of any effect. If any Vietnamese know about it, you could raise your hand and mention, but myself, I don't know. Partially because we are a minority and we were persecuted. We were considered as foreigners. We are not so much mixed with the population. Even though today they still consider us as a Western religion. And it's true somehow because of the debate on our ancestor worship. So they consider that we are outsiders. We do not worship our ancestors. That's the bad thing. That's one thing. And I think the efforts of going out of the Catholic circle is going on, and it's still going on today. But we don't have the big impact on in terms of concept and language on the outside circle. And as I mentioned, those terms that are used among the Catholic, like sinh thì, thương khó, still are not used today among the ordinary Vietnamese, even though 400 years already. And sometimes we could like to abandon those terms and use the common terms that the people use outside. That's the tendency. We create new prayer and use the language of the people outside Catholic circle instead of using the term that have been in use for centuries. So that's our situation. Like in our prayer after the Easter, we have Lạy Nữ Vương Thiên Đàng. There's a term khoái lạc that has been used for centuries. Now we abandon that term because it has a negative connotation outside of the circle. Okay, any more questions? I would like.
Thank you, Father, for your presentation. I have a question. You mentioned that Majorika used the Nome language to write his catechism. Meanwhile, Alexander trying to create a new characters, alphabet letters to write his catechism. My question is, for you, which one is more effective at that time? Of course, Nome language was more familiar to the people at that time. But why did Alexander not use Nome language? Why he tried to make a new one? So, yeah. But for us today, I think it's easier to learn the language now more than Nome. So, but for people at that time, I think Nome is better for them. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, as I already mentioned, those two, they are all significant and valuable. The Rose and Majorika in different ways. They are all, but I think Majorika is more significant in terms of going with the common people. You know, the Latin alphabet were meant for the missionaries, foreign missionaries, to read. They created that character for the missionaries, not for the people. So the people can read and speak the language of the people by reading. Like myself, I can, if I want to speak Khmer, Khmer is written in Khmer language, very difficult. So I translate it into Latin alphabet. Or I speak Chinese, I feel Pinyin and so on. So that's for me, not for the people. The Latin alphabet is for missionaries, are meant for missionaries. So his books are meant for missionaries. And the missionary can read his book and preach to the people. Here, this book of Majorika is meant for the local preachers. The local preacher could read the Nome character and read them to the local, common people. So they are different. Please.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I am Emmanuel, Oblate of Mary Immaculate. Speaking about enculturation, I just remembered a French oblate who worked in the northern parts of Cameroon as a missionary during the 50s. And at a time, he got to a very remote area to celebrate Mass, and he realized that he was not with the host and then the wine that is commonly used in the church. And so he explained the situation to the catechist, to the lay catechist, and who suggested that he uses the local wine of the people and then the local bread, something like that. And that created a big problem that culminated to his being dismissed of his function as, because he later became a bishop, that's culminated in his being dismissed as bishop, or I don't know what your stance on that, looking at the discussion on inculturation.
Yeah, thank you very much for telling your story and ask my view. Yeah, I think it depends on the context. I could only offer the principle. I cannot give an answer to a very particular context. Yeah, but in case I were in that context, I think we need to keep the tension between traditional formula and the new formula. That's what I mentioned. And we keep the effort to make those formula compatible to one another. So now we have very strict rule on the liturgy. Yeah, that's our context today. So it could be dangerous if I give an answer given the context 30 years ago. Yeah, because we would think of 30 years ago in the viewpoint, in the perspective of today. That would be very dangerous. Yeah. So it depends on the rule and the regulation and on the availability of the local context and so on. But the principle is we could use new formula in compatibility with the old formula. In case we have bread and wine, we could not replace some other form of bread and wine. But in case we do not, what would we do? I don't know. Yeah, it depends on the regulation from Rome. Is it very strong or not? It depends on the need of the people. Is it very strong or not? It depends on what kind of wine and bread you have. So it depends on many other elements. Thank you. Yes, Father.
I'm just curious, Father Tinh, in the context of Vietnamese church history, with that contact between the gospel of Jesus and the local context of Vietnam at that time, what might have been the challenges that our missionaries like Maiorica or the Road encounter? What were the problems, if any, that they encountered with that contact of culture and the gospel?
Yeah. I think the Road has its own contact because he stays among the literati, and his concern is about the literati, about the culture. He's also concerned about his, how do you say, agonistic approach against other religion, local religion. So he talked about other religions, but Majorika didn't talk about other religion. So I think they all have their own contact with the culture, but on different level and different places, different contexts. Some stay at the imperial court, so they met with the literati, the noble, the mandarins, and so on. But some stay in the villages, so their contexts are quite different, even though it's still Vietnam, but different. So that's why the significance that we learn about different missionaries and different approaches. And I think that it's not that one approach could be applicable to every context, even though it's still Vietnam, but it's different. Is that your question? Among themselves? Yeah, conflict, yeah. Because the road despises Buddhism. He speaks a little bit positively about Confucianism, but he despises Buddhism. I think that's also a problem. Among the missionary approach, they also, in practice, they also ask people to throw away all the statues, yeah, other statues and so on. But that's understandable because it was 17th century, and they came from Europe. We could hardly expect them to have the mentality that we have today about evangelization. Yeah, but what I would like to try to present today is they also have their own inculturation in their own way. Their effort is worth noting, but they also create a lot of tensions. Yes, yes.
Thank you, Father Tim. Maybe this question is related to a previous one. So my question is maybe about inculturation in general. Are there limits to inculturation or appropriation of the gospel? So we know Jesus illustrated the values of the kingdom in his time using parables, everyday objects, mustard seed, fig tree, and they spoke well to the Jewish culture at that particular time and place. So my question is, they speak to us, the parables, even 2,000 years later, and is there a possibility that these stories, these parables, would lose their novelty, their freshness, or their potency, or their relevance 500 years later, 1,000 years from now? Could there be a danger to that?
Yeah, you mean the parable in the gospel or Majorika stories?
It could be both, Father, because the way I see it, Maiorica based it from Jesus' gospel, Jesus of Nazareth, which is the basis. So maybe both of them.
Yeah, thank you. I believe that Majorika stories are not compatible to our culture today, because many of them are threatening. Even though threatening is part of the story that we are reading in the newspaper and so on. Yeah? But we need not to retell the stories that Majorika has told his audience. So it depends on the audience. The stories come from them, from the audience. And it depends on which point of the doctrine or of faith that you want to emphasize. Then you will choose the story. I just want to mention the necessity of stories, the legitimacy of using stories. But I don't know which kind of story that we should use, because it depends on the particular context. If we preach the gospel to children, then we use another story. If preach the gospel to old ladies, then would be another story. Regarding the parable in the gospel, they are irreplaceable, just like the gospel themselves, because the gospel themselves are irreplaceable in their wordings, in their images, but they could be translated. And that's the problem of enculturation. That's the issue of enculturation. How could we do the translation? In my presentation today, it's just some indicator. I just offer some indicator and not the complete solution to the question, because that question we need to live, not to answer. We have to live the question, how to translate the gospel images and parables and concepts into our context today. And that's the living process. We cannot have the answer of today that would apply to all the time and all the place. Yeah, coming back to Father Eric question on the conflict between the missionary approach and the local people. Aside from that, we don't see any conflict in moral level, except from the ancestors worshiping. Yeah. So the Catholic are considered to be the moral people, to be the people who love one another. So they are called đạo yêu thương. So the Catholics are known for being loving people. So morally they did not create any conflicts among the Vietnamese people. But in regard to the ancestor, then that's a problem. Yes. Yeah, one more question. And,
My name is Moses, OCD Carmelite. My question is the other side of previous question. So I'd like to know about the existing virtues or traditions of Vietnam, or Vietnamese people, that contains Christian values, which can be translated easily. Is it?
yeah, please repeat your question again.
So the existing tradition, Vietnamese tradition of virtues that contains Christian values. Do you, if you can you give us some list?
You mean Vietnamese virtues?
Yeah. So when missionary came, there was already existing the tradition, Vietnamese tradition and virtues.
Are they compatible with the
Yes.
Christian values? Yeah. Yeah, there are many virtues that are compatible with Christian value. We already mentioned, many people have mentioned filiality, đạo hiếu, filiality. Many people mention the religiosity of Vietnamese people. They worship, how do you say, trời, thiên. They worship heaven. That's very compatible with Christian. But there are also, those are virtues are ideal. Yeah. The Vietnamese cultures are not ideal. Vietnamese cultures, when it is practically lived, it has a lot of other elements. Our Vietnamese culture are famous of being aggressive, as you can notice. This could be a good sign. No? If you are a missionary and you are aggressive, somehow it could be good. But aggressivity is also sometimes not compatible with the gospel. Filiality, we worship, we respect the king, the father in the house, and respect heaven. But practically, not everybody follow that value because that value is ideal. They are mentioned in the books of the masters, and they are taught in books, but in practice. What I mean is, what is culture? Culture is not ideal, it's not abstract reality that we describe in book. Culture is what people are living today. And Vietnamese culture are not like that. There are many values in Vietnamese culture are against the gospel value. So that's the picture. The culture is people living, many elements in it are against the gospel value. So inculturation does not mean that we always have to praise the culture. Sometimes we need to condemn the culture, and that's inculturation. Okay, maybe that's all. Thank you very much for the questions.
Thank you very much, Father, for that. And I hope we will learn more about this in our history of Catholic Church in Vietnam, as what Father Rohel just sent us a message of. Maybe next semester it will be open. And so now, before we end our program for today, let us have the awarding of certificate to be awarded by Father Eric as the LST President and Brother Rico for the LST Student Council President. The certificate reads, "This certificate of appreciation is presented to Father Nguyen Tin, SJ, STD, for sharing his invaluable insight, expertise, and reflection as guest speaker for the Theological Hour Conference entitled Formula, Stories, and Similes in Catechesis, Maiorica's Catechism and its Initiatives of Inculturation, given this 18th day of November 2022 at the Oratory of St. Ignatius of Loyola, Loyola House of Studies, Ateneo de Manila University Campus, Quezon City."
Before we go, I'd like to say that at the beginning, I introduced Father Tin. On purpose, I did not say that he is an alumnus of LST, because I wanted to say it now with more drama. I searched our archives of the school, searched for the name Nguyen Tin, and I saw his record. Just to let you know that on March 19, 2003, Father Tin graduated with an STB degree in LST, summa cum laude. So that's the dramatic approach that I wanted to say. So thank you so much, Father Tin. I also want to thank everyone for attending our Theological Hour. So let's again clap for Father Tin. Okay, final blessing. Before the final blessing, just to let you know that by the second semester, we will also have Theological Hour. I think we'll have at least 2 or 3 Theological Hours for the second semester. So let us all stand. The Lord be with you. May Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Have a good lunch. Thank you.